Hey, good afternoon. Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions on this fine, fine rainy day. I rolled out of the house and I had not actually noticed it was raining yet until I went outside and I went, egad. I didn't know I was supposed to do this. Now I'm going to have to go check and see if my basement is flooding again, as it periodically does. I hope the sump pump holds out. 540-0580. If you have a legal question, you jump on. I just want to touch base on one thing. I posted on Facebook, and it seemed to be very popular in terms of people liking it, but I had opined or noted that I did an adoption yesterday afternoon, and we did the final stage of the adoption because we had previously had to terminate one parent's parental rights. Then the appeal period passes, and some other things happen, and we had an adoption hearing, and, of course, nobody showed up and objected, and it was great, and it was very short and sweet. But it was really fun because you could tell the kid was excited, the family's excited, the grandparents were there, and it's rare as an attorney you get to go up to the courthouse and everybody's just happy to be there. In fact, I would say 99 probably and a half times out of 100, anybody that's with you in the courthouse is not happy to be there. So anyhow, I just want to note that if you have an adoption or you've ever been involved in one, you know how special it is, and it's a great thing for us lawyers to be able to get involved in. I mean, I'll never get to deliver a baby, but I will get to do an occasional adoption, and I appreciate that. 540-0580. Joe, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. And by the way, I never lived in a house that had water in the basement. How is that, you know?
You don't want it.
I don't think so. Hey, Mr. Rominger, I appreciate your show, especially since you extended to 2 hours. I got a question. It doesn't actually apply to me. I've been married so long. I don't think anybody else would want us either way. But anyhow, it's a divorce question.
Okay.
I know two people. One of them is a family member, and she filed for divorce. There were what do you call it, domestic violence or something involved, and alcohol and stuff like this. But anyhow. She was told, she went to a lawyer, and the lawyer told her that after she filed a paper, it's going to take 2 years. In other words, the person has 2 years to answer that, whatever you call it, the divorce. Is that correct?
Okay. Repeat that for me so I make sure I'm following you.
All right. She filed a divorce.
Okay.
Now, the lawyer told her for him to even to answer that filing, it can take 2 years before he has to answer the filing. There is a house involved. The value is less than $100,000, and they got a $40,000 mortgage on it.
That is correct. The Pennsylvania legislature, when they adopted no-fault divorce, said that if one party will not consent to the divorce, they can hold it up and don't have to respond to it or do anything in terms of getting divorced for 2 years.
That is correct.
However, the caveat is the court does have the power under what's called special relief to grant relief pending the divorce. And so if she files a divorce the right way and she wants to, she can add supplemental motions and say, Judge, I'm going to have to wait too long to get divorced here, and things need to be done with the property up front. And the judge can, order the sale of a house, for instance, or the division of a pension, or go on an asset-by-asset basis rather than a comprehensive marital settlement order. So she still has options available to her, but if she's planning on getting remarried, she's not going to be able to force an actual act of divorce for 2 years from separation, not from filing, and that's also a tricky thing. So if I live with a woman and we're married and we've been separated for a year and I file the divorce, I only have to wait a year because we've already got 1 year of separation in. If we file the divorce while we're living together, we have to go 2 years unless the parties agree. And then the other little caveat is if I was separated 2 years, but right before the 2 years was up, I moved back in with her and we reconsummate the marriage, and I'm sure everybody knows what that means.
Right.
Then the 2 year period starts all over again.
Yeah. So basically, if she would push it, we were talking about big bucks, which she does not have. Am I correct?
It could be expensive to push it. Yes, and it depends. Some lawyers don't move without $5,000 in the escrow account. Some lawyers will take payment plans. So there's a lot of options out there.
Well, that was my question about what, so you would think something like this would be in the ballpark of $5,000?
No, I think it could be done cheaper than that, but it just depends on who the practitioner is and what they want to charge. But yeah.
She gave the lawyer a $1,000 retainer.
That's a fair for what I consider a simple.
But he also told her, he says, don't bother, you're not going to be able, you have to wait 2 years no matter what you do. That's what he told her.
For the divorce, absolutely. Potentially for handling other things, no, but he's right that the cost can get very prohibitive. The flip side is you could look at it as a harassing strategy, and I would never recommend anybody file litigation purely to harass somebody. But at least if you need to do these things and you're trying to do these things, maybe the other side goes, hey, wait a minute, I have to pay all this money to defend myself now. Maybe I should just agree to the divorce and stop being an idiot.
Well, yeah, unless I would pay the bill,
Right.
Okay. Hey, thanks a lot.
All right, hey, take care, Joe.
Listen, that's what I like about you. Nothing is white and black. Everything is gray,
I know. It's all gray. Trust me.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Bye now.
My brother said that. We were talking about that the other day, and he said, everything's black and white. There are no shades of gray. And I said, that's your problem. And he's like, no, that's your problem. You guys think everything's gray and everything has to have 5 answers, and you lawyers can't say anything with certainty, and you can't ever pin anything down. And I said, that's not always true, but it is true that we do seem to get bogged down in the gray areas more often than not. And then I just reminded him he was a layperson, cracked him on the back of the head, and sent him on his way. 540-0580. John, you're on the air.
Hello?
Yes, John.
Yeah, I called you a couple of weeks ago, and you went to break, and I got cut off.
Uh-oh.
I was asking you about bankruptcy. I got disabled here a few years ago.
Uh-huh.
And I had to quit working, and haven't been able to pay my credit card bills and stuff. Now, the one company forgave half what I own, but I still owe a substantial amount to them, plus a couple other things. Now, it's my question is there a statute of limitations on debt like this?
Yeah, if you stop paying a bill, you haven't paid it at all in 4 years, then you'd be in breach of contract for failure to pay. And the other side only has that 4 years from you when you last pay or re-acknowledge the debt to bring a cause of action. Or at least from when they knew you breached. So I'll give you one little caveat would be like if I said pay me in a year and you didn't pay me in a year, the statute starts to run when you don't do what you're supposed to have done, which is pay me in a year. If I say pay me on the 15th of this month and you don't pay me on the 15th, then I'm on notice that if I don't do anything in the next 4 years, I'll lose my right to pursue it. If it's been reduced to a judgment already, however, there is no statute of limitations issue, and this judgment stay, and they don't need to be time limited by statute of limitations.
I've never been notified of any judgments.
Right. So otherwise, if you just got old debt sitting out there, now here's the thing. They can still report it out as a bad debt, right? They just have no legal recourse to collect it.
And is there a statute of limitations on that?
I don't know what the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act truly says about a debt that is no longer collectible, but which was not paid. I think that they can hold it against you on the short answer, but I don't know the long answer whether or not there's any point you can purge that or not.
One further question. If I'm taking a chance on these, I'm hoping for the four.
Right. And John, I got to go to break, but we won't lose you this time, okay?
All right.
Hold on. 540-0580. See you after the break. Hey, welcome back. 540-0580. Carl Rominger here answering your legal questions. We are going to have Mark Virginis on a little later. I wanted to get him on, and I hope he can get here. I'm pretty sure he can, right, Shane? He can? Okay, good, because you might have saw they downgraded our credit rating here in the United States of America yesterday. And I know the recriminations are going to be, oh, you took too long to put it together, and that's kind of the spin that the White House wants to put on it. The reality is, and it all comes back to this, they came up with $2 trillion in made-up, phony baloney deductions. And somebody finally called them on it. And somebody who matters, somebody who actually has a little more power than they do, at least at one level, called them on it. Now they're really mad. And they don't know what to do because their little shell game, somebody picked up the cups and said, wait a minute, this is a scam, and you can't just run your little shell game here on the street anymore. And now they're mad and upset. And I want to talk to him about that because I want to know, what does this actually mean for us? And I guess everybody has to wait till Monday morning to find out what it really means for us. But hopefully it means our government will stop spending. That's my goal. Okay, John, you're back.
Yes.
Okay, so what's your next question?
If all of a sudden the sheriff would knock on my door or something like that.
You don't go to jail anymore, and you can file the bankruptcy after he knocks on your door.
Okay.
How's that sound?
Very good. Thank you, sir.
All right, which is the other reason why I explain to people sometimes when you get a judgment against somebody who's already kind of, under the weather, so to speak, financially, sending the sheriffs out often is the, what sends them into the bankruptcy court. Because before that in Pennsylvania, there's not much incentive to do that. All right, my friend.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. 540-0580, answering your legal questions here on the air. Donna, you have a question about POAs?
Yes. Thank you for letting me call in.
That's our pleasure.
Yes. I'm 72, and I'm in pretty good health, but I do not have a POA yet. And many people that live alone like I do don't have POAs, in which case, let's say something happened to me, I went into a coma. The closest person here is a stepdaughter. Would she have to go into court
get a
to declare me
guardianship?
Mentally incapable?
She would have to have you found incapable of taking care of your own estate or affairs, and the court would grant her a guardianship. So basically, right, and it can happen under two circumstances. One is you lapse into a coma, or number two, we come over to your house and it's become clear that you're just not able to take care of yourself anymore, and you're kind of maybe become demented or something.
Right.
And of course, and to most people's credit, you don't usually, some people catch it, but a lot of times I always say, like if I misspell something in a document, I wouldn't have misspelled it if I'd have realized it, right?
Uh-huh.
And I always say people that are slipping into dementia quite often don't realize all the time that they are. Sometimes they're acutely aware of it, and other times, they don't know what they forgot to do, or else they would have done it.
Right.
So I always tell people, it's good to have somebody that's a family friend or a doctor that you meet with regularly that can, help you with those things and give you an honest evaluation of where you're at. It doesn't sound like you're having any problems, but your question is it gets more complicated and expensive if you don't give somebody a POA.
Right. It seems like for people who live alone, it's not good not to have a POA, but if you're competent, you sort of hate to have one. You know what I mean?
And that's the reason, because it's a very powerful document. And so, if you gave me your POA and I decided I wanted to sell your car and rent your house out to somebody else,
right.
I mean, you could overrule me on all those things, but I could run around with a POA and transact the business and do it all, and then you'd be stuck undoing it all because you would say, wait, I didn't want this, but I don't have to get your permission to do anything when I have a POA.
Right.
You just have to follow the rules of keeping your best interest in heart. And obviously, two adults can quite often agree on or disagree on what's in somebody's best interest. So I can imagine a lot of couples around America right now, for instance, are going to have the following conversation. We should put more money in our 401ks. And the other spouse says we should put less money in our 401k. Now, they're both making reasonably prudent decisions that we would say that neither one of them is wrong. One's going to be proven right. But if they were the POA for each other and doing the opposite of what the other one wanted to do, they still would be meeting their fiduciary duty because they're trying to do the best for their principal.
Now, let's say something did happen, and I don't have any children of my own. Would my real relatives, like my sister or brother, let my stepdaughter step in to get a court?
Well, they could, although theoretically, right, the real family, I say real, however we want to use that word, the real family members would obviously have a level of priority if they wanted it.
Okay. And then just one more question. There are agencies that have where you can get a POA that's not a relative.
Right.
How do I know if I got a PA through an agency like that they are trustworthy?
The short answer is somewhere on weekendappointment.com we posted it. There's a not-for-profit out there, an elder law that does referrals for those sorts of things. But we could certainly find you one if you contacted us.
Okay, and how do they make sure they're not going to steal from you? Or?
Well, this is you can't make sure anytime you give somebody a POA, you can't be 100% protected because by its very nature, the document allows them to transact your affairs, and all that matters is what's in their heart at that point. And of course, the only thing with a company or an organization is just how long has it been in business and how many people has it served successfully. But even then, a rogue employee, I mean, there's always a possibility. But the flip side is, Donna, we have to take risks every day. And so when I got my car and drove here today, I got on the interstate with 800 other yahoos,
right?
Some of whom couldn't drive. But I have to make that risk in order to make my life work. And the same thing here is, you can't shred every magazine that comes in the mail because it has your address on it.
Right, exactly. Another question is, I would think since a POA person could just do about anything they felt like, why aren't there more regulations to do with the person that has the POA? Do you think?
The POA is held to a standard, but the answer is what's more important is that the person who's granting the POA know how powerful it is. And we can limit them, too. In other words, we could make the POA very limited, so it's for health care only. We could make it limited so it's for certain financial transactions only.
Okay.
The problem is, and when I'm dealing with a client, let's say, who's 83, we can sit down and say, honestly, you're probably going to need somebody to help you with not only financial things or medical decisions at some point, but maybe both. And if we create a limited power of attorney and you do become incapacitated and we have to do something that's outside the scope of the limited power of attorney, then we got to go get a guardianship anyhow, so we would have been better off to draw up the broad form in the beginning.
Right.
And when we sit down, that's the question I say to you. And I'll ask you this. If you were in my office, I say, Donna, how do you feel about this person? I know you want to give your niece this POA. But what do we really know about her? And you say to me, well, I've just seen her at family dinners, and she seems like a nice girl, and she's got some kids, and I've always liked her, and she's pleasant. And I'll be like, well, do you know if she has a criminal background? And you say, well, I don't think she does. So why don't we just check a little bit here? Or sometimes clients say to me, oh, she's a good girl. She had some trouble one time. She embezzled some money from the fire company. But ever since then, she's been a good girl. And I look at him and go, that's not your POA.
Yeah. Plus, the fact is I may trust someone at this point in time, but people can change.
Right.
Years later, they might be on drugs or become alcoholics. I mean, so it's just a matter of, like you say, taking a risk sometimes, I guess.
And it's a measured risk, because here's the other question. I mean, again, we're gonna age you a little bit, right? If you're 93 and you don't have any kids and you need a POA and they steal from you, you're probably not going to miss it that much. If you're 45 and somebody steals your life savings, you're going to be scratching your head real hard.
Right.
And I mean, I'm not saying that one's better than the other, but I'm saying one situation may be more dire. It just depends where you're at. But there are people who've ended up, destitute because people stole from them. On the flip side is, there are people who've ended up in bad positions because there's nobody willing to take over the niece goes, she didn't think I was competent. I'm not going to go out of my way to go get a guardianship. We'll just let the aging department take care of all this.
Right.
And then you're in the hands of some bureaucrats who are very nice people, social workers, but they're still not family.
Okay, well, I appreciate the time you took to talk to me.
Yeah, Dawn, it's my pleasure.
Yeah,
it's my pleasure. Can you do something about the rain? Can you do anything about that today?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Your hands are tied.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thanks.
Bye-bye.
540-0580. I'm Carl Rominger. Answer your legal questions here. Donna was just talking about POAs. I think it's very important that people, if you don't have one, you should at least have a reason, like she did, not to have one. In other words, Donna sounds to me like somebody who's a very intelligent and rational person who's thought this through and saying, I'm struggling with the concept of who should I designate as a POA, if at all, or should I look at other alternative solutions? And it just shows she's thinking and she's on the right track. I would strongly recommend, if you don't have a will, you go to weekendappointment.com where you can get a free will, and we have those available for you. And you actually get to meet with me or one of the other lawyers, but it's usually me. They just fill in for me in case a last-minute scheduling issue. And we go over the will. I help you kind of figure out an estate plan. We also can add a living will, and we can add powers of attorney. And I can tell you that these documents, particularly for husbands and wives and elderly people, are very powerful. 540-0580. Robert, you're on the air.
How you doing, Paul?
Good.
All right. Listen, last night,
You on your lawnmower?
yeah, definitely, yeah. But I was curious, if you get a DUI and they take you to the hospital, okay, to get your blood drawn,
Mm-hmm.
all right, do they know the result instantly?
Sometimes, but usually not.
Okay.
Usually the lab's got to give them back a result, and since they're not looking at you like a guy that they're going to rush to surgery.
Uh-huh. And even if they don't, like, could you refuse a breathalyzer because you just feel like they're making a mockery out of you? You know, you don't want to be there for their amusement. You know what I'm saying? Like, they have you there for an hour, you know, on the side of the road, and you're just like, you know, if you want to do something, you know, you can take you to the hospital and
Right.
draw blood, you know. Can they just go ahead and just do that? Just like that and that?
Yep. If you're driving, you've implicitly consented that if a police officer has a reasonable basis to believe that you were driving under the influence, that you would go ahead and consent to those tests. Now, you don't have to take the roadside portable breath test, but you have to be very careful not to refuse the official blood or breath test, or urine test for that matter, and the officer chooses the test according to the law. So my basic advice to folks is always, always, always take the official breath test or blood test. Now, could I come up with circumstances where I wouldn't? Absolutely. But
they don't say anything about, you know, an official test.
well, they call. Listen, when you're on the roadside, they don't say official test, but on the roadside they'll ask you, "Would you like to take a portable breath test?" You can say, "No, I won't take a portable breath test." But you have to be clear, because a police officer could say he said he wouldn't take a breath test, and I'm assuming he's refusing the official breath test.
Oh, you're kidding me. They can't go and do that.
Oh, they do it all the time.
Wow, that's ridiculous. That doesn't make any sense.
Robert, welcome to the new police state, my friend. Welcome to the new police state. I got to go break, brother.
You know, they're going to do that and then put you in pink handcuffs and shackles and have you prancing around like a fool?
Yep.
That's a terrible police state. That is not good. That's not America.
I know. That's why we now have roadblocks, so that we can check you out as you drive through. All right, my friend. I'll see you after the break. Take care. Welcome back. Carl Rominger here discussing the law, anything legal you want to talk about. And I'm going to have Mark Virginis on here. We're going to talk about I'm going to call it the sovereign debt crisis, which is not the Greek one, the American one. Robin, you're on WHP 580 with Carl Rominger.
Hi, Carl.
How are you?
I'm well. When you brought up the POA, when my mother passed away 11 years ago, my father immediately did executorship and POAs. However, all three of his daughters, myself and my two sisters, were each equally named executor, and all three have powers of attorney. Now, I know in my family, I'm 100% sure that none of us siblings would fight amongst each other, each one waving a POA, but what about for families where that may not occur?
Okay.
Can that make things complicated?
Here, first of all, and just so you know, a point of clarification is when somebody dies, a POA is automatically voided. So there's no such thing as a dead person who has a POA that can be used validly by anybody living. And instead, you have to open an estate, and you have to get what are called letters testamentary or letters of administration here in Pennsylvania.
And that's where the executor...
Correct. And if
all three of us are that as well.
And if the will says everybody's executor, then you have to all go take an oath at the courthouse. So if you actually are on as the executrix or the executor or the administrator, you have actually gone to the courthouse. If you haven't been to the courthouse, then you're not the administrator or the executor, because you have to have an oath administered at the courthouse. So that's a good test to know whether they've actually, if somebody's telling you you're an executor, well, when the estate was open, you should have been there. Now, they're not going to open it with the will unless everybody's there that's supposed to be there, or they sign what's called a renunciation, where they say, I don't want to be an executor or an administrator of this estate. I renounce my right to do that under the will or the laws of intestacy.
So he just named us that at the attorney's office, but none of us went to court, obviously, and certainly with the POA, while my father is still alive and very well.
Right.
None of us are going to do anything odd to him, but it just kind of crossed my mind, and I'm thinking, my God, there's three of us.
And you won't go to the courthouse until he dies to get sworn in. But here's the dealio. The short answer is sometimes we put all 3 kids on there so that the kids can sort it out. Sometimes we put all the 5 kids on there because the parents just don't want to pick one over the other. I usually advise if you have 2 or 3 kids, you could put all of them on there. If one's clearly older, or one's a CPA and one's a plumber, you might pick the CPA only because they deal, more with that sort of thing. On the other hand, you might pick the plumber because you thought he's always had better follow through. The short answer is parents can pick one kid over the other. A lot of times, though, it's just easier to put everybody on and either let you guys renounce at that time or just fight it out. And I can tell you, having represented estates where I've got to get 2 or 3 signatures, sometimes I scratch my head because, one sister wants to do this, one brother wants to do that. One thinks they should sell the house at auction, one thinks the house should be sold by the realtor, and the other one wants to live in it.
Well, thankfully, all 3 of us pretty much agree on, what my father wanted to do, and hopefully that would never change. Generally, I like to think we're not that type of a family. He basically named us all because none of us really wanted to have it. So he said, all right, I'll fix all of you, and you all are.
You're right, and that's exactly what that's a good way to do it. The other thing is, and I just want to touch on POAs again because another person had just called in, but they just wanted me to explain a POA again. A power of attorney is a document where you, as the principal, meaning the person who's creating it, give your agent, the person who's going to use it, the power to transact business on your behalf, and other people can rely on that. So, Robin, I'm going to talk to you about this just to explain it for a second. If I show up at your house and I say I'm with the power company, right?
Uh-huh.
And you let me in because I have the badge on and I go check the meter and I leave, I'm an agent of the power company. And so while I'm there, you might say to me, hey, what's going on with my bill? And I say, well, I'm not in billing. I can't fix that. You're going to have to call the billing people because that's not in my power. Okay, I'm an agent for the power company, but I'm only authorized to read the meters. I'm not authorized to fix your bill. You're going to have to talk to another employee. So that's the idea of an agent versus a principal. A simple example, the agent can speak for the principal, but here's the question. So you as the bank or the lawyer or somebody, when somebody rolls in and says, I'm my dad's power of attorney, you're like, well, how broad is your authority? And that's where the power of attorney itself becomes important because it will speak to what you're allowed to do or not allowed to do as the agent for the principal. Is that making sense? Am I making sense?
You did.
Okay, good.
You
so
did.
What's that?
If anything happens to him where he cannot make rational or sound decisions, for 83 years old, Sam works full time because he's bored.
Right.
I hope I age as well. But if something would occur that we can each or all be able to do or act on the behalf, if one sister couldn't be there, that type of thing, which is why he did that. It gave him a lot of comfort. And we're all 3 pretty rational girls, for sure, but it just crossed my mind. Did
you say 3 rational girls?
Yeah.
Wow,
yeah, it's almost an oxymoron, isn't it? But there's some families out there where I could see potential turmoil with that occurring if there's multiple.
We joke amongst the lawyers, and I say, this is just, sitting around, and every once in a while these old attorneys like to, draw some funny diagram or something to show you. And the one lawyer sits down one day and he goes, this is how I explain estates. And he takes 2 lines, 2 axes, the Y and the X, and this is the number of kids and this is the amount of money. And as the number of kids go up and the amount of money goes up, you get farther and farther up in the right-hand corner of that graph. And he said, that's your, the more money there is and the more kids there are, the more likely there is to be big problems with the administration.
Gotcha. Well, this isn't real big. It would just be much
and that's just our joke. If there's 15 if there's 15 kids and $15, there's nothing to fight over, right?
Yeah.
But if there's 15 kids and $15 million, there's always going to be at least one kid who's sure that he was supposed to get all of it.
Right.
Daddy told me that, I swear.
Yeah. Well, he promised me.
Right. Oh, yeah. And you know what? And it is complicated because a lot of families do have complex histories. So I was involved in a will challenge one time where, and this is a great example why you never write your own will. The girl wrote her own will, and she said, so-and-so is to take what they want, okay? And then the rest is divided amongst, then she left that person out and put all the other kids down there. But the way she wrote it was what we call a general power of appointment. and we said that it lapsed, meaning the way it was written, it wasn't a good general power of appointment. Therefore, she got nothing, and all the other kids split it. Okay, but she wasn't in that second lump of kids. Here's the twist: none of those kids had seen their mother in 20 years. The girl on the top of the will, who wasn't written in the right way on the homemade will, who got nothing, took care of her for the last 20 years.
That's usually what you hear.
And boy, we fought it, but there was just nothing we could do. And I mean, the judge was right. And that's the problem with the law. It can be a little harsh. You know, people think, well, you're going to go into the courtroom and the judge is going to tell you, this is, well, to be fair, this is what we need to do. And the judge looks and says, I don't make the rules. These are the rules, and I'm a judge, and I'm stuck with them, and this is horrible, and I hope the rest of you are ashamed of yourselves, and you should give your sister something, but I can't do it. Anyhow, I just point that out as, yes, you can end up in all kinds of crazy situations in estates.
Yeah, I knew that if you don't have somebody specifically named in a will, they can actually, for example, the will involved with an ex-husband, he didn't name his children because he doesn't see them, they don't bother with him, that type of scenario, issues between mom and dad from before.
Right.
And the attorney said you cannot just omit them. You have to specifically say you are not giving them anything.
Yeah, theoretically in Pennsylvania, by not mentioning them, you should be okay. The problem is they then come in and say, now what father wouldn't remember that he has 2 kids? And the fact that he didn't even mention us tells us he must not have been of sound mind at the time he wrote the will.
Right, now you have a fight and argument over that.
And so, of course, I always chuckle, though, because when I talk to the client, I'll say, hey, you got to add these kids in here and give them something so that, prevent that problem. And they'll be like, but I don't want to leave them anything. And I'm like, I understand it is nominal, but leave them something.
That's what I was thinking myself. I'm like, why are you omitting them? And if we were still married, I would never have done that. I would have definitely, whether he's not around to fight me now type of thing.
Right.
Because I thought that was wrong, but it was just like, wow.
I know. Robin, I got to go to break, and then I'm going to talk with Steve and Frank after the break, okay?
Thank you very much.
All right, Robin, take care.
You too.
540-0580. See you after the break. Hey, that's official. The Chinese have released a statement saying, quote, the good old days, end quote, of borrowing are over. So put that in the memory bank. Years ago, the British used to borrow a lot of money from the United States on really good terms. And then one year we changed their terms just a teeny little bit. And the British Empire was no more, basically, because they'd been living off of cheap money from us after the war through the 50s, after they'd just kind of spent themselves into oblivion. And they never were the power again afterwards. And a lot of people look at that as the watershed moment when they stopped getting their free $50 billion rollover loan from the United States. We'll talk more about that with Mark later, I think. But my point is, this could be the watershed moment, folks, when China eclipses the United States because they're not going to loan us their money anymore. And apparently we need it because we can't stop spending. 540-0580. Steve, you're on the air.
Hi, Carl.
Hey.
Hey, I had a situation this week. I got a nasty letter from the township. And apparently in this letter, they said I was in violation of all these different ordinances in the township. And the big complaint was the fact that there was a car parked behind my house, which could not even be seen from the street. And a new neighbor had just acquired the property, which was behind my house. And I guess apparently they saw this car here, so they started whining to the township. So the township sent down a health inspector to check it out. And the health inspector said if I had removed the car within so many days that I was going to be in violation of the township ordinances and I was going to be fined so many dollars per day or whatever to do that.
Right.
The township never contacted me to inspect the property, to go up there and do it. She claims that she could see the car from the street, which she can't see the car from the street because it's hidden back too far.
Mm-hmm.
What she did was she drove up into my driveway, which is an apartment house, and drove all the way up toward the back of the house to check the property out and do it. Now, I told her, I said, you're in violation, I said, and trespassing on my property. I said, because one, I said, you didn't contact me ahead of time
Steve,
to let me know that you were going to inspect the property.
Let me slow you down for a second, how this works. Basically, the government can trespass on your property.
They can.
Basically. They can't come into the curtilage, okay?
Mm-hmm.
But here's the problem. They could still get a warrant to come back on and find this car based on information received. So you're not going to win that fight barking up that tree. And I just want to throw – I'm not trying to say that you weren't wrong. I'm just trying to tell you don't waste your time on that argument because it won't get you anywhere.
Yeah, well, shouldn't they have at least sent me a letter in the mail saying that they were going to inspect my property on such and such a date?
Right, but stop for a second. What are you going to do about it?
What do you mean, what am I going to do?
What are you going to do about it? You're going to blow up City Hall? Because no, that's what I mean. So the next question is, what legal remedies do you have? And the answer is there's no real legal remedy. The only thing you can do is write a letter that basically says, hey, you should have actually got permission or let me know you're going to come out here. They're going to say, hey, we rolled up your driveway to see if you were home. We were actually going to knock on your door, and when we did, we happened to see the car and confirm what we'd heard. I know what you're going to say, which is they went farther than they need to knock on your door, but nonetheless, you're not going to win a lawsuit against them because they have qualified immunity. And even if we could come up with a clever play to prevent any penalties in the meantime, they could just reissue a warrant, come out there, and cite you for the car again anyhow. And, in fact, a lot of people don't realize this, but most zoning codes have ordinances that talk about inspected and uninspected cars and where you can and can't store them. So you're living in a zoning area where I'm sure if the car is not under current inspection, it's not allowed to be uncovered or visible or in the open.
Yeah, well, apparently this neighbor just bought this house and started complaining about it. It's to the township.
That's how it works.
And so basically, I said to the lady from the township, I says, well, you're allowed to have a flatbed trailer too, aren't you? She says, oh, yeah. She says, as long as it's registered with the state and it's on your property and it's not on a on a dirt lot or anything like that. I say, good. I said, because that junk car is going on that flatbed trailer and it's going to be parked right out from their back window. When they look up and when they come out every morning out of their kitchen window, they're going to see that car sitting there every morning. They're going to wish they never called. And that's the way you get even with people like that.
Well, really, and actually, you're right. In fact,
they can't do a thing about it because it's on a mobile unit and it's mobility. And plus, the only thing I got to do is put a tarp over it, and they can't say a word.
That's right. You have to cover it.
Yeah, you have to cover it, but they're still going to be looking at that car every morning when they get up now.
You're right. No,
it wasn't really bothering anybody. Nobody complained. The car sat there for a year and a half. Nobody complained about it. All of a sudden, you get some liberal dingbat that buys a property and thinks they're going to stand there and start telling everybody how they're going to live their life and everything like that. But I got news for them. The thing about when you're living on a property like that is you have 5 neighbors down there. You could have a complaint about every neighbor. The neighbors have kids who stay up late at night till 12 o'clock at night swimming in their pool. You could complain about that. You can complain about the other neighbor who has dogs barking all the time.
Steve, I had a case a few years back, okay? Guy has a little towing company, and he builds a big pole barn on his property to store his tow trucks in. And you can fit, 4 pretty good-sized 3 big rollbacks and 1 hook truck in there, okay? And it's obviously not a garage for personal use. And the township gives him the permit, he builds it, and he uses it for a year or so. And then he decides that he's going to put up a privacy fence, not for any other purpose, but because a development had gone up beside his land. And he thought, I'll put up a privacy fence, that'll give those people there so they don't have to look at my, my tow truck, okay? Thought he was doing them a favor. So when he starts digging to put the fence up, one of the neighbors, and neighbors are like dogs. They see fresh dirt, they get all excited, right? So they call the township and say, what's going on here? What's he building? What's going on? So the township comes out and says, well, actually, you're zoned. You can't have a business here. And your neighbors are complaining, so you got to close down your business. Long and short of it is he hired me. We lost it in front of the zoning appeals board. They shut us down, or supposedly shut us down, but couldn't because then we timely appealed it, and I won it in the court of common pleas, and a judge basically ordered that he gets to keep his business there, and there's nothing that can be done about it because it wasn't grandfathered in. It's a whole different concept called zoning by estoppel. But anyhow, long and short of it is now we had been willing, because, you talk about the rules, we had been willing to cover up things. We've been willing to restrict the times that we would back up trucks, not during certain hours and all kinds of things. We had 100 different things that we were willing to do as a conditional use of that property if the neighbors and the zoning board would have agreed, right? Well, guess what the judge's order says? Just says, you can't do nothing to us, so we can just do what we want now. And as you can imagine, all those yo-yos up the hill who thought they were going to, shut down their neighbor, whose only mistake was to try to help put a fence up, because he thought it was a nice fence, too, by the way. He actually was going to not put it up after that, and I told him, no, put it up, But anyhow, my point is, they got what they deserve, because if they'd have just worked with the man, they would have been a lot happier.
Yeah, well, they did the same thing with me when I put a garage in up there, too. I put a 24 by 32-foot garage, and one of the neighbors complained about that. They said that was up there and said that was in violation of the property and everything like that. But I got approval from the township to be able to do it. It just seems like everybody's got to stick their nose into something where they don't belong and try to make your life more miserable.
Now, you probably know, if you listen to the show, you know my brother buys junk cars. Should I send them to you so you can get rid of this car?
Well, I'm going to be getting rid of it, but see, what I do is I restore and classic muscle cars.
Okay.
So when I take a car in there, I tear the bodies off, tear them down to the frame. So naturally, somebody sees a frame sitting there, they're thinking, oh, that's a piece of junk frame that he's letting laying around up there, but they don't realize that frame's going back onto that car. It's just that I have to piece everything back together again when I go to piece the car back.
Right.
It takes time, and they just think it's a junkyard because they see this stuff sitting there piled up, and it looks like junk, which it does look like junk, but it's going to be reused again and be cleaned up and put back on the car again. So
Right. Well, one man's junkyard is another man's paradise, and vice versa. So
that's it. Well, I appreciate it.
All right, Steve, thanks.
Thank you. Bye now.
540-0580. And, of course, as you guys know, we're a 2-hour show now, so we're going to be live from 2 to 3 as well. So you don't have to go anywhere. If you've been thinking about calling in, you're a little shy, or you just want to get home before you call, 540-0580, and we'll get your legal questions aired here on the air. And, of course, I'm always happy to talk a little politics, particularly with this debt crisis. Frank, you're on the air.
Carl, good afternoon and great show.
Thanks.
Carl, hope our buddy Bob Durgan's listening to your show this afternoon, because I have something, and listening to your other callers that are going through bankruptcies and divorces, this is a very, very small monetary issue, but it's just like a pebble in my shoe, and it goes back to something that Bob's been talking about for 2 weeks. And I thought I'd call in for any of your callers or your listeners like myself that have been on the fence with the traffic control camera issue. This might give them a little bit of food for thought. When back when in my teen years, anything that would have got me to drive slower, I would have been against it. Now that I'm in my mid-50s, I started thinking this is probably a good thing. Until something came for me in the mail the other day. 2 weeks ago, I'm visiting some friends down in Maryland, specifically the D.C. suburbs. Sunday, very early in the morning, friend's wife calls. She's having a car problem. I had him parked in from the night before, and he's one of two people I would allow to drive my car. He's a lifelong friend that I trust with my life.
Right.
And I said, just take my car. It's just a couple miles down the road. Well, seems like he went through one of those camera speed control areas. And I got this in my mail the other day. I opened it, and I was just kind of in shock looking at this. What is this? I really couldn't even put it together till it took me about 15 minutes to think about where this had come from. And
can you hold till our next hour?
Carl, I can.
Okay, hold on. We'll get you in on the next hour. And anybody else holding on the phone, just hold. We'll be back. All right, guys, weekend appointment.